Chapter 1. The Girl from Cement City. Bonnie Parker's world had always been small. She grew up in Cement City, Texas, a rough industrial suburb where the air clung to your skin and dreams died young. Her father, a bricklayer, died when she was just 4, leaving her mother to scrape together a living for her 3 children in a tight-knit community of hard faces and broken promises. Bonnie was different, small, sharp, with a face that could cut glass and a laugh that carried through the smoke-stained streets. She clung to stories of romance, scribbling poems in the corners of her schoolbooks, dreaming of stage lights and whispered confessions in the dark. She wore her mother's old dresses, curled her red hair into perfect spirals, and memorized the lyrics of every love song that crackled over the radio. But life had little interest in her dreams. She married young to a boy named Roy Thornton. He was tall, cocky, with a slick smile and a bad habit of staying out too late. She thought it was love, but it turned to bruises and empty promises. He vanished one day, leaving her alone in a rented room with an empty ring and a name she would never shake. She would later learn that he died in a prison gunfight, the same way he had lived, on the wrong side of the law. But Bonnie Parker did not grieve long. She was too young to waste time on ghosts. She took a job as a waitress, slinging plates to tired men and sharp-eyed women, scribbling poetry on napkins between shifts. She smoked cigarettes, painted her nails bright red, and dreamed of escape. She kept a diary, filled with sketches of men with wide-brimmed hats and cold, hard eyes. She wrote her own name beside theirs, imagining herself a gangster's moll, a queen of the underworld. But reality had a way of disappointing her, until the day she met Clyde Barrow. Chapter 2. The Boy Who Would Be King. Clyde Chestnut Barrow came up rough. The son of sharecroppers, he spent his childhood in the dirt-poor backwoods of Texas, living in a shotgun shack with more siblings than sense. His father worked his fingers to the bone. His mother scrubbed floors and washed other people's clothes, but they never seemed to climb out of the mud. Clyde was small but tough, a boy with fox-like eyes and a grin that could charm a preacher out of his Bible. He had a restless energy, a spark in his blood that pushed him to steal his first car at 14, to break into his first house at 15, and to dodge his first bullet before he had even kissed a girl. By his late teens, Clyde had already become a small-time crook. He ran with his older brother Buck, smashing windows, hot-wiring cars, and selling stolen goods for a few dirty dollars. He was in and out of jail, picking up scars and bad habits along the way. But it was Eastham Prison Farm that truly made him an outlaw. In 1930, Clyde was arrested for a series of robberies and thrown into Eastham, one of the hardest, meanest prisons in Texas. There, he learned to survive the hard way. He watched as men broke under the weight of chain gangs and iron fists, their spirits crushed, their bodies beaten into submission. But Clyde would not break. He sharpened his anger into a blade, his desperation into a weapon. He vowed never to walk into another cage again, even if it meant dying in a hail of bullets. He swore revenge on the Texas prison system, a promise that would shape the rest of his short, violent life. He left Eastham a different man, thinner, harder, with the eyes of a wolf and the heart of a killer. And that's when he met Bonnie. Chapter 3. The Meeting. They met in January 1930 at the house of a mutual friend in West Dallas. Clyde had just escaped from Eastham, thin as a rail, his ribs sharp against his shirt, his eyes hollow from too many nights spent staring at concrete walls. Bonnie was 19, tiny and fierce, with her hair curled perfectly, her lips painted bright red, a cigarette dangling from her fingers. She was standing in the kitchen making hot chocolate when he walked in. He paused in the doorway, his eyes locking onto hers, his grin flickering like a match. She looked him up and down, a spark igniting in her chest. For Clyde, it was love at first sight. For Bonnie, it was something more. A chance at the life she had always dreamed of. A life of speed, fire, and freedom. They talked for hours, their words tumbling over each other, their laughter filling the small, smoke-stained room. He told her about his escapes, his near misses, his plans for a life of crime. She told him about her poetry, her broken marriage, her dreams of running away. By the time the sun rose, they were tangled together on a worn-out couch, their breaths mingling in the dark, their fingers intertwined. Bonnie scribbled his name in the corner of her notebook, her heart pounding in her chest. She had found her outlaw. Chapter 4: The First Heist. Their first job was a disaster. Clyde's hands shook as he pulled the revolver from his belt, his palms slick with sweat, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Bonnie stood beside him, her small frame trembling, her wide eyes darting around the darkened store. "Stay calm," Clyde whispered, his voice too loud, too young. "Just get the money, and we're gone." But the clerk hesitated, his hand inching toward the shotgun beneath the counter. Clyde's heart stopped, his finger twitched. The gun bucked in his hand, the sound deafening in the small space. The bullet shattered the glass behind the man's head, sending shards raining down onto the floor. Bonnie flinched, her hands clenching into fists, but she did not run. They grabbed what cash they could and stumbled out into the night, their breaths sharp and ragged, their shoes slipping on the wet pavement. The engine of their stolen Ford roared as they sped into the darkness, the headlights slicing through the fog. Clyde laughed, his voice wild, his heart pounding in his chest. Bonnie clung to his arm, her face flushed, her pulse racing. She had never felt so alive. Chapter 5: Blood on the Highway. Their first real taste of blood came on a rainy night in 1932, somewhere along the backroads of Texas. They had hit a small bank in Hillsborough, the take barely enough to fill the gas tank of their stolen Ford the 5.8. Clyde had a new gun, a sawed-off shotgun, heavy in his hands, the wooden grip still rough from the cut. Bonnie had switched to a revolver, her small hands wrapped tight around the cold metal, her lipstick perfect even in the dim light. They were halfway to Dallas when the roadblock appeared. 2 police cars, their lights flickering like distant stars through the rain, their engines growling in the mud. Clyde hit the brakes, the tires skidding on wet gravel, the car lurching sideways as the headlights caught the glint of badges and the barrels of shotguns. Bonnie's heart slammed against her ribs. Clyde's jaw clenched. "Hold on," he whispered, his voice tight, his hands white-knuckled on the wheel. He didn't stop. Instead, he gunned the engine, the roar of the V8 cutting through the night like a gunshot. The police opened fire, the windows shattering around them, glass spraying like rain, bullets thudding into the seats, the dashboard, the metal frame. Bonnie ducked, her face pressed against the cold leather, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. Clyde leaned out the window, his shotgun bucking against his shoulder, the recoil slamming into his bones. The first shot missed, the pellets shredding a fence post, splintering wood into the air. The second shot hit a deputy in the chest, his body jerking back, his hat flying into the mud. Bonnie screamed, her voice lost in the thunder of engines and gunfire. Clyde swerved, the car fishtailing through the mud, the engine howling, the wheels spinning. He fired again, the shotgun bucking in his hands, the smell of gunpowder thick in his lungs. The second police car slid sideways, its front bumper crumpling against a tree, steam hissing from the radiator. They hit the highway at 60 miles an hour, the wind tearing at their hair, their hearts pounding like war drums. Clyde laughed, the sound wild and broken, his teeth bared in a feral grin. Bonnie reached for his arm, her fingers trembling, her pulse still racing. She had never felt more alive. Chapter 6: The Rise of the Barrow Gang. With each robbery, they grew bolder, faster, deadlier. Clyde started recruiting, pulling in men he trusted, men who knew how to handle a gun and keep their mouths shut. His brother Buck Barrow joined first, fresh out of prison, his loyalty unshaken despite the years of hard time. Blanche, Buck's wife, came too, though she begged her husband to leave the life behind, to run with her to some quiet place where the sun still shone and the cops didn't have their faces on every wanted poster from Texas to Missouri. But Buck loved his brother, and Clyde loved his guns, and the road called them both like a siren song. The Barrow gang became a force of nature, a whirlwind of bullet casings and tire tracks, smashing through police barricades, robbing banks, gas stations, and grocery stores, killing anyone who got in their way. They left a trail of bodies and broken glass, of burned-out engines and smoking gun barrels. They were ghosts on the wind, untouchable, uncatchable. And Bonnie wrote it all down, her pencil scratching against the thin, crumpled pages of her notebook, her words sharp as a switchblade, her heart wild with the thrill of the chase. She penned poems about Clyde, about love and loyalty, about guns and bullets, about the fast cars and hard men she had come to love. She signed them with a flourish, her name curling like smoke across the page. She had become a legend in her own right, a girl with a gun, a poet with a revolver, and the world had taken notice. Chapter 7. The Photos That Burned the World. It was April 1933 when the world truly saw them for the first time. They had holed up in Joplin, Missouri, hiding out in a small brick apartment above a garage, their guns stacked beside the bed, their stolen cash stashed in a coffee can beneath the sink. The days blurred together, smoke and whiskey, laughter and gun oil. Bonnie posed for Clyde's camera, a cigar clenched between her teeth, a Thompson submachine gun in her small hands, her eyes sharp and wild. She wore a beret, her skirt hiked up to show her slender legs, her smile a challenge to the world. Buck and Blanche joined in, their faces lit by the flash, their bodies framed in the cracked glass of the kitchen window. Clyde leaned against the Ford, his hat tipped low, his pistol in his hand, his grin wide and dangerous. They thought they were untouchable. They were wrong. The police raided the apartment 3 days later, bullets tearing through the walls, plaster dust choking the air, glass shattering around them. Clyde grabbed his shotgun, his teeth bared, his heart slamming against his ribs. Bonnie stumbled, her hands slick with sweat, her breath coming in sharp, panicked gasps. They fought their way out, the air thick with gunpowder and screams, the engine of the Ford V, 8 roaring to life, the tires screeching against the pavement, the doors rattling in their frames. They left behind a suitcase full of clothes, a pile of stolen cash, a stack of blood-stained letters, and the photos. The police found them scattered across the floor, the negatives half-crushed beneath a fallen chair, the prints smudged with blood and gun oil. They took them, cleaned them, published them in every paper from New York to Los Angeles. The world saw Bonnie for the first time, the gun moll, the cigar-chomping outlaw, the wild-eyed lover of the most dangerous man in America. Their legend was set in ink, and their days were numbered. Chapter 8. The Bloody Summer. The summer of 1933 was a bloodbath. The Barrow gang tore across the Midwest, robbing banks, killing cops, and slipping through police traps like smoke through a keyhole. They slept in abandoned farmhouses, ate from tin cans, and drove stolen Fords until the engines screamed. But their luck began to crack. On a humid night in Platte City, Missouri, the gang holed up in the Red Crown Tourist Court, a small, run-down set of cabins on the edge of town. Clyde pulled the Ford V, 8 into the gravel lot, his eyes sharp, his gun heavy in his lap. Bonnie leaned against his shoulder, her skin feverish, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She had been hurt in a car accident weeks earlier. The flesh on her leg burned to the bone by leaking battery acid. She hid the pain behind a tight smile, her lips painted bright red, her hair curled perfectly, her eyes still sharp as gunfire. But the law was closing in. A local sheriff spotted their car, recognized the bullet holes and shattered windows, the mud-caked tires and blood-stained seats. He called in reinforcements, surrounded the cabins, aimed his rifle at the thin wooden walls. Clyde woke to the sound of gunfire, the crack of bullets splintering the door, the roar of engines in the distance. He grabbed his shotgun, his bare feet slapping against the cold tile, his heart slamming against his ribs. Bonnie screamed, her voice sharp, her hands fumbling for her revolver, her leg buckling beneath her as she hit the floor. Buck and Blanche stumbled into the hallway, their faces pale, their breaths coming in sharp, panicked gasps. They fought their way out, bullets flying, glass shattering, the Ford screeching out of the parking lot, the engine roaring, the tires spitting gravel into the darkness. Buck took a bullet to the head, his blood spraying across the back seat. His wife's screams filling the small space, her hands clinging to his chest, her tears blinding her to the flashing lights behind them. They made it to an abandoned amusement park outside Dexter, Iowa. Their hearts pounding, their breaths coming in sharp, painful gasps. Buck bled out in the dirt, his hands clawing at the weeds, his eyes rolling back in his head. Blanche clung to his body, her face streaked with blood and tears, her screams echoing through the rusted remains of the Ferris wheel, her world shattering around her. Bonnie and Clyde barely escaped, their clothes soaked in blood, their bodies bruised and battered, their hearts pounding with fear and rage. They were ghosts now, hunted and haunted, slipping through the cracks of the world, leaving a trail of bodies and broken glass. But ghosts can only run for so long. Chapter 9: The Betrayal. The end came not with a gunfight, but with a whisper. Henry Methvin, a member of the Barrow gang, had cut a deal with the law. He had grown tired of running, of hiding, of watching his friends bleed out in the mud, their eyes wide with fear, their bodies broken by bullets and bad luck. He told the Texas Rangers where Bonnie and Clyde would be. A quiet stretch of highway outside his father's house, a place where the road curved and the trees hung low, their branches whispering in the wind. Frank Hamer, the legendary Texas lawman, took the bait. He assembled a posse, armed them with Browning automatic rifles, and set the trap. They waited in the trees, their hearts pounding, their breaths coming in sharp, controlled gasps, their fingers wrapped tight around the cold metal of their guns. Bonnie and Clyde never had a chance. Chapter 10: The Last Drive. It was May 23, 1934, a warm, bright morning, the air heavy with the promise of summer. Bonnie leaned against Clyde's shoulder, her thin frame curled against his side, her eyes half closed, her breath coming in soft, shallow gasps. Her legs still throbbed with every bump in the road, the skin raw and red beneath the bandages. Clyde gripped the wheel, his jaw set, his eyes sharp, his foot heavy on the gas. He had a pistol in his lap, a shotgun on the seat beside him, his mind already on the next bank, the next roadblock, the next escape. The car rounded the corner, the trees casting long shadows across the road, the leaves rustling in the breeze. The lawmen opened fire. Bullets tore through the windshield, shattering glass, ripping through flesh and bone, spraying blood across the dashboard, the seats, the metal frame. Clyde's head snapped back, his body jerking against the steering wheel, his foot slamming down on the gas, the engine roaring, the tires screaming against the asphalt. Bonnie reached for him, her fingers slick with blood, her voice lost in the roar of gunfire, her body thrown against the door as the car lurched sideways, the tires skidding on the gravel, the metal groaning as it smashed into the ditch. The gunfire continued, the barrels flashing, the smoke curling into the air, the echoes of bullets ringing against the trees. They died together, their bodies torn by gunfire, their blood soaking into the seats, their hearts shattered by betrayal and bullets. The lawmen approached the car slowly, their breaths sharp, their guns still smoking, their eyes wide with the shock of what they had done. The car was riddled with bullet holes, the glass shattered, the seats soaked in blood and gun oil. Bonnie's head rested against Clyde's shoulder, her eyes wide, her lips still painted bright red, her hand curled around his arm, her pulse long gone. They had lived fast, died young, burned bright. Their story would echo for decades, their names whispered in dark corners, their photos plastered on wanted posters and the front pages of newspapers from New York to Los Angeles. They were gone, but their legend had just begun.